She slapped me for burning the turkey on Thanksgiving, and my cheek turned blue. But the next day my daughter demanded, "Cover up the bruise and keep quiet, my fiancé is coming." I nodded and smiled. She had no idea that a surprise was already waiting for her. She left the house and never came back. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The oven door slammed open. Gray smoke billowed out in thick waves, carrying the acrid stench of charred meat and ruined hopes. I stood there, kitchen mitt dangling from my hand, watching 5 hours of careful preparation turn to ash before my eyes. The turkey sat like a blackened monument to my failure. What should have been golden brown skin had transformed into something resembling charcoal. The kitchen timer continued its shrill beeping, mocking me with its too-late warning. I waved my hand frantically, trying to disperse the smoke before Aaron noticed. The gray clouds curled around the ceiling, seeping into every corner of my 1980s kitchen. 27 years of family photos on the refrigerator seemed to judge me from behind their magnetic frames. "Well," I muttered, forcing a laugh that came out as more of a wheeze. "Looks like our turkey decided to become more caramelized than planned." The joke fell flat in the empty kitchen. I grabbed a dish towel and flapped it uselessly at the smoke detector, praying it wouldn't start screaming. My osteoporosis-weakened back protested as I reached up, but I kept waving. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. My heart sank. "Dad?" Aaron's voice carried that particular edge I'd learned to fear over the past 5 years. "What's that smell?" I turned toward the kitchen doorway, still holding the ridiculous dish towel, trying to arrange my face into something resembling optimism. The smoke continued its lazy dance around the ceiling, betraying my attempt at damage control. She appeared in the doorway like an avenging angel in an apron. Her dark hair, so much like her mother's, was pulled back in a messy bun that somehow made her look both professional and frazzled. The expression on her face shifted from curiosity to horror in the span of a heartbeat. "Dad, how could you?" The words exploded from her lips. "I asked you to watch it. One simple thing." Her eyes moved from me to the ruined turkey, then back to me. I watched her carefully constructed Thanksgiving plans crumble in real time. Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to help me carve turkeys when Shannon still lived here. "Honey, it's not as bad as it looks," I lied, gesturing weakly toward the disaster. "We can salvage this. Maybe scrape off the outside layer, add some gravy." "Salvage?" Her voice climbed an octave. "Dad, look at it. It's completely destroyed." She pushed past me to peer into the oven, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. The smoke had finally begun to clear, revealing the full extent of the carnage. What remained of our Thanksgiving centerpiece looked like something archaeologists might unearth from the ancient ruins. "I spent all morning preparing the side dishes," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I cleaned this entire house. I set the table with Mom's good china because I thought—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Because you thought what?" I asked, though something in her tone made my stomach clench. She turned away from the oven, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Not just anger or disappointment, but something that looked almost like relief, as if this disaster had solved a problem I didn't know existed. The kitchen timer finally stopped its incessant beeping, leaving us in uncomfortable silence. Erin stared at the floor, her hands clenched at her sides, and I realized that somehow, somewhere between the smoke and the shouting, I'd lost control of more than just dinner. "You know what, Dad?" Erin's voice cut through the lingering smoke like a blade. "Maybe this is for the best." I blinked at her, still processing the words. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with the weight of her statement. "What do you mean?" She started pacing, her sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. 3 steps to the counter, turn, 3 steps toward the doorway. Her hands gestured as she walked, as if she were conducting an invisible orchestra of frustration. "I wanted to spend Thanksgiving with Jesse's family," she said without looking at me. "But you insisted on family traditions. Your traditions." The words hit me like cold water. Jesse, the boyfriend I'd never met. The shadow that had been growing longer in our conversations over the past 6 months. I followed her as she moved into the living room, my mind struggling to catch up. "You wanted to what?" My voice sounded strange in my own ears. She whirled around to face me, her dark eyes flashing. "Jesse invited me to his parents' house weeks ago. They do this whole thing with extended family, And his grandmother makes this incredible stuffing recipe that's been in their family for generations, and she stopped herself, pressing her lips together. I sank into my leather armchair, the same one I'd been sitting in for 15 years. The fabric was worn now, shaped by thousands of evenings watching the news, waiting for Erin to come home from dates or work or wherever she went when she wasn't here. So, our family traditions don't matter anymore? The question came out harsher than I intended. That's not what I said. She remained standing, arms crossed over her chest. But Dad, I'm 27 years old. I have my own life, my own relationships. I can't spend every holiday pretending we're still the perfect family we used to be. The words stung because they were true. We weren't the perfect family anymore. We hadn't been since Shannon walked out 5 years ago, leaving nothing but a note on the kitchen counter and a daughter who barely spoke to me for months. I thought you enjoyed our Thanksgivings, I said quietly. Erin's expression softened slightly, but she didn't uncross her arms. I do, Dad, I did. But things change. People grow up and start their own traditions. With people I've never met. Because you never asked to meet him. The words burst out of her like steam from a pressure cooker. Every time I mention Jesse, you change the subject or find something else to talk about. You act like if you ignore him long enough, he'll disappear. I started to protest, but she was already moving again, pacing toward the mantel where our family photos stood in their silver frames. The images showed us through the years. Erin's first day of school, Christmas mornings, summer vacations. In every photo taken before 5 years ago, Shannon's smile beamed from the frame. Maybe I didn't want to share you, I admitted. The honesty surprised us both. Erin stopped pacing and turned to look at me, her anger faltering for just a moment. Dad, after your mother left, you were all I had. The words spilled out before I could stop them. These traditions, these holidays, they were the only things keeping us connected. I know that sounds selfish, but it is selfish. Her voice was gentler now, but firm. And it's not fair to me. We stared at each other across the living room, the afternoon light fading through the windows. The house felt too quiet without the sound of the kitchen timer or the hum of the oven. Even the smoke seemed to have settled, leaving only the lingering smell of burnt dreams. So what now? I asked. Do you call Jesse and tell him you're coming after all? Something flickered across her face, too quick for me to identify. It's too late for that. They eat at 5. Besides, I already told him I couldn't make it. Because of me. Because I thought this mattered to you. She gestured around the room, at the carefully set dining table visible through the doorway, at the family photos on the mantel. I thought keeping our traditions alive was important. The weight of her sacrifice hit me like a physical blow. She'd given up what she wanted to preserve something I needed, and I'd managed to destroy it anyway. I studied my daughter's face in the dying afternoon light, searching for something familiar. The stubborn set of her jaw, the way she held her shoulders when she was defending herself. It was all so achingly recognizable. You've become just like your mother, I said before I could stop myself. Erin went rigid. Don't you dare compare me to her. 5 years ago, she also put her own desires above family values. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. She also decided that what she wanted mattered more than what we had built together. That's completely different. Erin's voice rose, and she stepped closer to my chair. Mom abandoned us. She left without a word of explanation, without even trying to work things out. I'm trying to have an adult conversation about my life choices. I gripped the armrests of my chair, feeling the worn leather crack under my fingers. Are you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're making plans behind my back, just like she did. I told Jesse no. The words exploded from her. I chose to be here. I chose our tradition over his family's invitation, and you're still not satisfied. She was right, and that made it worse. Even her loyalty felt like a betrayal somehow, tainted by the knowledge that she'd rather be somewhere else. I looked up at the mantel, at the family photos that had been carefully arranged to exclude Shannon's presence after she left. But you couldn't edit a person out of 20 years of marriage, any more than you could edit her out of our daughter's face. I see her in you sometimes, I said quietly. The way you move when you're angry, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking. Sometimes it's like she never left. Erin's expression crumbled. She sank onto the couch across from me, her defiance melting into something that looked like exhaustion. Is that why you don't want to meet Jesse? Because you think I'm going to leave too? The question hung between us like smoke. I wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Because maybe she was right. Maybe every time she mentioned his name, I heard the echo of Shannon's voice talking about needing space and finding herself. Your mother started pulling away gradually, I said instead. First it was working late, then weekend conferences, then separate bedrooms. She told me she needed time to figure things out, that she felt trapped by our routines. I'm not, Mom. Erin's voice was steady, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. I'm not planning to disappear. I just want to live my own life while still being your daughter. But you are disappearing. The admission felt like pulling a splinter from deep beneath the skin. Every month you visit less. Every holiday becomes a negotiation. You talk about Jesse's family like they're more interesting than us. Because they are new. She leaned forward, her hands clasped together. Dad, I love you, but I need more than just the two of us sitting around this house, talking about the weather and Mom's empty chair. The reference to Shannon's absence hit like a physical blow. For 5 years, I'd been trying to fill the space she left behind, to be both parents to a daughter who was growing away from me despite everything I did. The dining room table still had 3 chairs, even though we only ever used 2. I still bought groceries for 3 people and found myself cooking portions that were too large. I'm not trying to replace anyone, Erin continued. I'm trying to build something new, something that includes Jesse and maybe someday includes you too, if you'll let it. I looked at her sitting on the couch where Shannon used to read her evening novels, where she used to curl up with her legs tucked under her like a cat. The resemblance was striking in that moment, not just physical, but something deeper, the same restless energy that had eventually driven Shannon out our front door. What if I can't? I asked. What if I'm too old to start over? Then I guess we'll keep having burnt turkeys and ruined holidays. Her smile was sad but genuine. But Dad, I need you to try. I pushed myself up from the chair, my joints protesting the movement. Erin watched me carefully as I took a step toward her. I walked toward her slowly, reading every micro-expression on her face for signs of retreat. My daughter had inherited Shannon's ability to bolt when cornered, and I wasn't about to make that mistake twice. Let's find a compromise, I said, stopping just close enough to rest my hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away, but I felt the tension in her muscles. Today we spend together, as family. Tomorrow we'll invite Jesse for dinner. I can finally meet him properly. Erin's eyes narrowed slightly, searching my face for hidden agendas. You're serious about meeting Jesse? Dead serious. The words felt foreign in my mouth, but I forced them out. I should have asked months ago instead of pretending he didn't exist. She shifted on the couch, and I let my hand drop. The leather cushion creaked as she repositioned herself, tucking one leg beneath her. Another gesture that reminded me painfully of Shannon. But I pushed that thought aside. This wasn't about Shannon anymore. What brought this on? Erin asked. 5 minutes ago you were comparing me to Mom, and now you want to play happy family with my boyfriend? The skepticism in her voice stung, but it was fair. I'd given her plenty of reasons to doubt my motives over the years. Every time she'd mentioned Jesse, I'd found ways to change the subject, or suddenly remember urgent tasks that needed my attention. Because I'm tired of losing people, I admitted. And I'm tired of being the stubborn old man who drives his daughter away because he can't accept change. Erin studied my face for a long moment. I could see her weighing my words against years of experience with my behavior. Trust didn't rebuild itself with a single conversation, especially when that conversation had started with accusations and ended with painful comparisons to her absent mother. Fine, she said finally, but only for your sake, not because I think this will magically fix everything between us. The conditional acceptance wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for, but it was more than I deserved. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She stood up, smoothing down her rumpled clothes. You still have to get through dinner with Jesse tomorrow, without interrogating him about his intentions or making him feel like he's not good enough for your daughter. I can be civil. Can you? The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. Because the last time I brought someone home, you spent the entire evening asking him about his job prospects and whether he planned to settle down in Chicago. I winced at the memory. That had been 2 years ago, and the relationship hadn't lasted another month. At the time, I'd convinced myself that I was being protective, but looking back, I could see how my behavior had pushed both of them away. I'll try to do better, I said. I promise. Erin walked toward the kitchen, and I followed her lead. The ruined turkey still sat on the counter like evidence of the evening's disasters, but somehow it didn't seem quite as catastrophic anymore. We had salvage work to do, both with dinner and with our relationship. So, what do we tell Jesse about why I suddenly want to meet him? I asked as we surveyed the damage. The truth, Aaron said, opening the refrigerator. That you finally realized you were being ridiculous and decided to act like a normal father instead of a territorial animal. Her words were sharp, but there was less venom in them than before. Maybe the olive branch was working, even if she wasn't ready to admit it yet. I watched her pull out ingredients for what looked like an improvised meal, her movements efficient and familiar. I can work with that, I said, reaching for an apron. But first, let's see if we can salvage tonight. We moved around the kitchen like dancers who'd forgotten their choreography. Aaron chopped vegetables with surgical precision, while I heated olive oil in a pan, both of us maintaining the careful distance of people pretending everything was normal. Salt, she said without looking up. I passed it to her, our fingers not quite touching. The silent stretch between us, filled only by the sound of her knife against the cutting board and the gentle sizzle from my pan. 20 minutes ago, we'd been shouting at each other, and now we were back to the domestic routine we'd perfected over 5 years of shared meals and careful politeness. Chicken's ready, I announced, though she could see that for herself. Erin nodded and scraped her vegetables into the pan with mine. The immediate hiss and steam created a momentary cloud between us, and when it cleared, she was already reaching for plates from the cabinet. We knew each other's rhythms so well that we could coordinate an entire meal without speaking, but the familiarity felt hollow now. I watched her methodically arranging food on the plates, dividing everything with mathematical precision. Her movements had the same mechanical quality they'd possessed when she was 12 and angry at me for some perceived injustice. Back then, she'd eventually tell me what was wrong. Now she just performed her tasks with quiet efficiency, as if emotional distance could be maintained through perfect execution of household chores. Wine, I offered, though I knew she'd decline. Water's fine. Of course it was. Alcohol might lower our carefully constructed barriers, and we both seemed determined to maintain the artificial calm we'd negotiated. I filled 2 glasses with ice water and followed her to the dining room, where she'd already begun setting the table with the same methodical precision she'd used in the kitchen. The dining room felt different now than it had this morning when I'd optimistically set 3 places, one for each of us and one for tradition's ghost. Now there were only 2 settings, and somehow that felt both more honest and more lonely. Shannon's absent chair seemed to loom larger in the smaller arrangement. "This looks good," I said as we sat down, though the hastily assembled meal bore no resemblance to the Thanksgiving dinner I'd envisioned. Erin cut her food into small, neat pieces. "It's fine." Fine. The word had become her default response to everything over the past hour. How was work? Fine. How did you like the movie you saw last weekend? Fine. How do you feel about introducing me to the man you might marry? Fine. I tried a different approach. "Tell me about your week. How's the new marketing campaign going?" "It's going well." She chewed thoughtfully, her eyes focused on her plate. "We're launching next month." "That's the cosmetics account?" "Beauty products, yes." Each answer came with the minimum viable information, like she was rationing words. I found myself missing our earlier fight, because at least then she'd been engaged, present, showing me who she really was instead of this polite stranger who happened to share my kitchen skills. "And Jesse, how's his work?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "He's busy. Big project deadline." "What kind of software does he develop?" "Applications." She resumed eating, clearly hoping the topic would die there. But I was desperate to bridge the gap we'd opened, to find some way back to the daughter who used to tell me about her day while helping with dinner preparation. "What kind of applications?" Erin set down her fork and looked at me directly for the first time since we'd sat down. "Dad, can we just eat in peace? I'm trying to get through this dinner without another argument." The request stung because it revealed how she saw our interaction, as something to endure rather than enjoy. But I nodded and returned to my food, accepting the silence she preferred to my clumsy attempts at connection. Outside, the November evening was settling into full darkness, and the dining room windows reflected our quiet meal back at us, like a painting of domestic tranquility. But paintings were just surfaces, and I was beginning to understand that the life we'd built over the past 5 years might be just as shallow. 10 minutes of silence stretched between us like a challenge neither wanted to break. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. Where did you meet him? Erin looked up from her methodical cutting, expression guarded. At work. Your office? A client meeting. She returned to her food with increased focus, as if the vegetables required intense concentration to navigate properly. I took another bite, chewing slowly while I formulated my next question. The taste was fine, but I barely noticed it. Everything felt like a preliminary to the real conversation we weren't having. How long have you been together? A year. A year. An entire year of her life I knew nothing about. 12 months of experiences, conversations, and growing intimacy with someone who remained a complete stranger to me. The realization sat in my stomach like a stone. What's his family like? Erin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They're nice. Do they live in Chicago? Suburbs. Each answer felt like pulling teeth, and I could see her growing more defensive with every question. But I couldn't stop myself. A year was too long to know nothing about the man who might become my son-in-law. Too long to pretend he didn't exist in my daughter's daily life. What did you do for his birthday? Dad? Her voice carried a warning I chose to ignore. It's a reasonable question. I'm trying to understand your relationship. No, you're not. She set down her fork with deliberate control. You're conducting an interrogation because you can't stand that I have a life outside this house. That's not fair, isn't it? Erin leaned back in her chair, finally giving me her full attention. When's the last time you asked me about work without immediately changing the subject? When's the last time you seemed genuinely interested in anything I do that doesn't directly involve you? I wanted to argue, but the examples wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself remembering conversations where I'd ask perfunctory questions, and then steered the discussion towards safer topics. Her health, her car, the weather, anything that didn't remind me how separate our lives had become. I'm interested now, I said weakly, because you're afraid of losing me to Jessie. Her observation cut straight to the heart of my motivations. Not because you actually want to know who I am as an adult. The accuracy of her assessment made my chest tight. She was right, and we both knew it. Every question I'd asked had been motivated by fear rather than genuine curiosity, by the need to assess a threat rather than understand her happiness. Maybe that's true, I admitted, but I'm trying to change. Are you? Or are you just trying to gather enough information to find reasons why Jessie isn't good enough for me? I opened my mouth to deny it, but she continued before I could speak. Because that's what you did with David, and Marcus before him. You asked all the right questions and then spent weeks explaining why they weren't suitable. Too young, too unfocused, wrong career goals, wrong personality type. The pattern she described was undeniable. I had done exactly that, convinced each time that I was protecting her from making a mistake. But maybe the mistake had been mine all along. Jesse's different, she said quietly. He makes me laugh. He listens when I talk about work instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. He doesn't try to fix every problem I mention or offer unsolicited advice about my life choices. Each comparison felt like an indictment of my own behavior. How many times had I tried to solve problems she'd only wanted to share? How often had I offered advice when she'd simply needed someone to listen? He sounds perfect, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. He's not perfect, but he's good for me, and I'm good for him. Erin picked up her fork again, but didn't eat. The question is whether you can accept that or if you're going to keep trying to find ways to drive him away. I want you to be happy. Then prove it. She met my eyes directly. Tomorrow night, when you meet him, try seeing him as a person I care about instead of a threat to your control over my life. Control. The word hit harder than any accusation she could have made. Because that's what this was really about, wasn't it? Not her happiness or my concern for her future, but my inability to let go of the illusion that I could still guide and protect her the way I had when she was small. I don't want to control your life, I said. Then stop acting like you do. I tried one more joke, desperate to break the tension. At least now we know turkey can be barbecued, even in the oven. The words hung in the air like smoke from our ruined dinner. I watched Erin's face transform, her expression shifting from exhausted tolerance to something I'd never seen before. Pure, crystallized rage. You always do this. Her voice cracked like a whip. You always ruin everything. Her hand flew across the table faster than I could process what was happening. The impact of her palm against my cheek sounded like a gunshot in the quiet dining room. My head snapped to the side, and I felt my body tilt dangerously in the chair. The sting spread across my face like wildfire, but worse than the physical pain was the shock of it. My own daughter, my own flesh and blood had just struck me across the face like I was some stranger who'd insulted her in a bar. "Aaron, no." She stood over me, her chest heaving. "I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done pretending you care about anything except keeping me trapped in this house with your memories and your guilt." I touched my cheek gingerly, feeling the heat radiating from where her hand had connected. The skin was already beginning to swell, and I could taste blood where I'd bitten my tongue on impact. At 62, with osteoporosis weakening my bones, even a slap carried more force than it should have. "You hit me," I said, the words coming out flat and disbelieving. "Yes, I hit you." There was no apology in her voice, no regret. If anything, she sounded satisfied. "Maybe now you'll understand that I'm not your little girl anymore. Maybe now you'll realize that you can't joke your way out of treating me like property." I stared up at her from my chair, seeing Shannon's fire in her eyes, Shannon's stubborn defiance in the set of her jaw. But Shannon had never raised a hand to me, not in 20 years of marriage. Our daughter had just crossed a line her mother never would have dreamed of crossing. "Get out!" I whispered. "What?" "Get out of my house." My voice was stronger now, carrying the weight of 3 decades of authority I'd almost forgotten I possessed. "Get out now." Erin's confident mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that might have been fear. But she recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin. "Fine," she said. "I'll go to Jesse's. At least he doesn't think I'm his personal property." She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her footsteps sharp against the hardwood floor. I heard her grabbing her purse and keys from the counter, heard the back door slam with enough force to rattle the windows. The house fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the sound of my own labored breathing. I remained in my chair, one hand pressed to my burning cheek, trying to process what had just happened. My daughter had struck me. After 27 years of feeding her, clothing her, raising her alone after Shannon abandoned us, she had looked me in the eye and hit me across the face. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. I pushed myself up from the chair carefully, my joints protesting the movement. The dining room looked like the scene of a crime, half-eaten plates of food, overturned water glasses, the lingering smell of our ruined turkey hanging in the air like evidence of everything that had gone wrong. In the hallway mirror, I could see the damage clearly. A bright red handprint was already darkening into what would be a spectacular bruise by morning. My left eye was beginning to swell, and there was a small cut on my lip where my teeth had caught it. 27 years of sacrifice, and this was my reward. A bruised face and an empty house. I stood in the hallway for a long time after her car disappeared down the street, listening to the silence settle around me like dust. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times, marking another hour in what would become the longest night of my adult life. The cold from the kitchen seeped through the house as evening fell. I'd left the back door standing open after Erin's dramatic exit, and November air was turning our salvage dinner into a congealed mess on abandoned plates. But I couldn't bring myself to clean up yet. The destruction felt appropriate, evidence of what we'd become. I made my way to the bathroom and examined my face under the harsh fluorescent light. The handprint was evolving from red to purple, the swelling making my left eye look lopsided. At my age, with bones that had grown brittle over the years, even a slap from a young woman could cause serious bruising. The osteoporosis that made simple tasks more difficult had also made my daughter's violence more devastating. She'd struck me, actually struck me. The fact kept cycling through my mind like a broken record. In all my years of marriage to Shannon, through all our arguments and disagreements, we'd never crossed that line. Physical violence had been unthinkable, a boundary that civilized people simply didn't breach. But Erin had breached it. My own daughter, the child I'd raised alone after Shannon walked out, had looked me in the eye and decided I deserved to be hit. The betrayal felt worse than the physical pain, worse than the humiliation of being assaulted by someone half my size. I filled a bag with ice and held it against my cheek, trying to keep the swelling down. The cold bit into my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill spreading through my chest. How had it come to this? How had the little girl who used to bring me drawings from school and help me rake leaves in the yard become someone who could strike me without remorse? The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I moved from room to room, unable to settle anywhere, replaying not just tonight's disaster, but months of small disrespects that had led to this moment. Her casual dismissals of my opinions, her refusal to share details about her life, her obvious preference for spending time anywhere but here. By 9 o'clock, the bruise had darkened to deep purple, spreading from my cheekbone to my jawline. I looked like I'd been in a bar fight, beaten by someone much larger than my 120-pound daughter. The visual evidence of what she'd done was undeniable, impossible to explain away or minimize. Shannon had hurt me when she left, but she'd never raised a hand to me. She'd been cruel with words, dismissive with her actions, but never violent. Our daughter had managed to surpass even her mother's capacity for inflicting pain. I sat in my leather chair as the house grew dark around me, ice pack pressed to my face, thinking about choices and consequences, about respect and its absence, about what happens when someone you've sacrificed everything for decides you're worth nothing more than a slap across the face. The clock chimed 11, then midnight. I remained in my chair, planning. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as I stood at the counter, making coffee with mechanical precision. The bruise had reached its full glory overnight, a spectacular purple and black reminder stretching from my temple to my jaw. No amount of concealer was going to hide this evidence of my daughter's respect for me. The back door opened at 7:30 sharp. Erin walked in like she owned the place, keys jingling in her hand, assessing the damage with clinical detachment. She looked rested, satisfied even, her night at Jesse's apparently having agreed with her. Her eyes went immediately to my face. No gasp of horror, no rush to apologize. Just a careful evaluation, like she was inspecting merchandise for defects. "It's worse than I expected," she said, setting her purse on the counter. "You'll need makeup." I continued stirring cream into my coffee, saying nothing. The casualness of her observation, the complete absence of remorse, told me everything I needed to know about where we stood now. "Tonight my fiancé comes for dinner." Fiancé, not boyfriend, not Jesse. Fiancé. Another revelation delivered without ceremony. Hide the bruise and don't make a scene. This introduction matters to me. I nodded slowly, maintaining the perfect picture of a chastened father. "Of course, dear." She studied my face for any sign of resistance, but I gave her nothing. Years of engineering had taught me the value of keeping my cards close to my chest, and right now, I was holding a royal flush she couldn't even imagine. Good. She moved toward the refrigerator like she was conducting a military inspection. "I'll need you to go shopping today. Nothing fancy, but something better than last night's disaster. Can you handle that without burning anything?" "I think I can manage." The smile that crept across my face must have looked like embarrassment to her, maybe even fear. She couldn't know it was anticipation. She couldn't know that I'd spent the entire night planning exactly how to handle tonight's dinner, or that her violent outburst had given me the perfect opportunity to teach her about consequences. 7 o'clock, she continued, apparently satisfied with my compliance. "Jesse will be here at 7. I want you showered, dressed appropriately, and on your best behavior. Can I trust you to do that?" Trust. The word was rich coming from someone who'd struck me across the face less than 12 hours ago. "You can trust me completely," I said, and meant every word. She grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and headed for the door, clearly considering the conversation finished. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at me one more time. "Dad, don't embarrass me tonight. I mean it. Wouldn't dream of it." After she left, I finished my coffee slowly, savoring both the caffeine and the prospect of the evening ahead. She thought she'd won something with that slap, thought she'd established a new hierarchy in our relationship. She had no idea what she'd actually accomplished. I had 8 hours to prepare, 8 hours to put the finishing touches on a plan that would show my daughter exactly what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. First stop, the bank. Then the car dealership. I drove across town with the radio turned low, my bruised face hidden behind sunglasses despite the overcast November sky. The bank visit had been straightforward, a withdrawal large enough to make the teller raise her eyebrows, but not large enough to require additional paperwork. 40 years of steady engineering work and careful saving had its advantages. The Mercedes dealership sat like a glass cathedral on the main automotive strip, its showroom filled with vehicles that cost more than most people's annual salaries. I parked my 15-year-old Honda between two gleaming sedans and walked inside, my checkbook heavy in my jacket pocket. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The salesman was young, maybe Jesse's age, with the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd sized up my modest appearance and already dismissed me as a time waster. His assumptions were about to cost him easy commission. "I need to buy a car for my daughter," I said, scanning the showroom floor. "Something reliable but impressive. Her engagement gift." The word engagement changed his entire demeanor. Suddenly, I wasn't just a retiree browsing. I was a father, with deep pockets and specific intentions. He straightened his tie and gestured toward a silver sedan near the window. "This model might be perfect," he said, launching into specifications I already knew by heart. I'd researched extensively during my sleepless night, comparing models and prices with the same methodical precision I'd once applied to engineering projects. "Cash purchase," I interrupted. "Today. I need to drive it off the lot this afternoon." His eyes widened. Cash deals were rare, especially for vehicles in this price range. While he scrambled to process paperwork, I walked around the car, running my hand along its pristine paint. Erin would love it. She'd been dropping hints about a new car for months, complaining about her aging compact and its reliability issues. "Your daughter is very lucky," the salesman said as I signed documents. "This is quite a generous gift." "She's worth it," I replied, which was technically true. She was worth exactly this much effort to teach her about consequences. The transaction took 3 hours: title transfer, insurance arrangements, temporary plates, all the bureaucratic necessities that accompanied transferring ownership of a $40,000 vehicle. I sat in their customer lounge, sipping weak coffee and watching other families make decisions about transportation, wondering if any of them had been slapped by their children recently. By 2 o'clock, I was driving home in a car that still smelled like leather and possibility. The engine purred with German precision, every control responding exactly as intended. Engineering excellence from people who understood that attention to detail mattered. I parked it prominently in our driveway, angled so it would be impossible to miss from any window in the house. The silver paint caught what little sunlight filtered through the clouds, making it gleam like some kind of mechanical promise. Perfect positioning for maximum impact. Everything was falling into place exactly as I'd planned. 5 hours until Jesse arrived. 5 hours until Erin learned what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, when you confuse patience with permission to abuse the person who raised you. I stood beside the car for a moment, keys warm in my palm, and smiled despite the throbbing in my jaw. Some lessons were worth $40,000. At 3:30, I called through the back door where Erin had been bustling around the kitchen, preparing for what she clearly considered the most important dinner of her adult life. "Erin, come outside. I have a surprise for you." She appeared in the doorway wearing rubber gloves, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than her 27 years. The bruise on my face had faded enough that I'd been able to cover most of it with concealer, though careful observers could still detect the discoloration. "Dad, I'm busy. Jesse will be here in 3 hours, and I still need to..." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the Mercedes. Her mouth fell open. She pulled off the rubber gloves and walked toward the car like it might disappear if she moved too quickly. I watched her circle it once, taking in every gleaming detail, her expression shifting from confusion to amazement to something approaching disbelief. "Dad?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Is this for you?" I said, extending the keys. "Consider it an engagement present." She took the keys with trembling hands, and for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to throw her arms around my neck when I surprised her with small gifts. Her eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since she'd struck me. "I can't believe you did this." She was crying now, overwhelmed by what she perceived as incredible generosity. "After everything that happened, after I don't deserve this." "You're right," I said quietly. "You don't." Something in my tone made her look up sharply. The gratitude on her face began to shift into uncertainty as she processed my words and the coldness behind them. "What do you mean?" "This car was going to be yours," I continued, my voice as level as if I were discussing the weather. I spent my morning at the dealership, writing a check for $40,000, thinking about how happy it would make you, how proud you'd be to drive something this beautiful. She stood frozen, keys clutched in her fist, beginning to understand that this moment wasn't unfolding the way she'd assumed. But then I remembered something. I stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint discoloration the concealer hadn't quite hidden. I remembered the sound your hand made when it connected with my face. I remembered the look in your eyes afterward, not regret, not horror, but satisfaction. Dad, please. No? The word came out harder than I'd intended. You made your choice last night when you decided I was worth less than your anger. You made your choice this morning when you looked at the damage you'd caused and felt no remorse. I held out my hand, and after a moment of stunned hesitation, she dropped the keys into my palm. I'm driving this car back to the dealership this afternoon, I said. I'm going to sell it, probably at a loss, and I'm going to tell them exactly why. That my adult daughter, the one I raised alone for 5 years after her mother abandoned us, decided I deserved to be struck across the face for making a harmless joke. You can't, her voice cracked. Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong to hit you, but some lines can't be uncrossed, Aaron. I pocketed the keys and turned toward the house. Some apologies come too late. She followed me to the front steps, desperation replacing the shock in her voice. Dad, wait, please, can't we talk about this? I said I was sorry. I turned to face her one last time, seeing panic in her eyes as the full scope of what was happening began to dawn on her. Not just the car, everything, her security, her free housing, her safety net. You have 2 hours to pack your belongings and find somewhere else to live, I said, with the same calm precision I'd once used to deliver project timelines. You're no longer welcome in my house. You can't be serious. But even as she said it, I could see she was beginning to understand that I was completely serious. Where am I supposed to go? Jesse's place, perhaps, since you prefer his company to mine anyway. We've only been together a year. We're not ready to live together. Her voice climbed toward hysteria. And what about tonight? He's supposed to meet you. He'll have to meet the real you instead, the version that hits her father and shows no remorse. I checked my watch with theatrical precision. 1 hour and 58 minutes now. She lunged forward and grabbed my arm. Dad, you raised me. You can't just throw me out over one mistake. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then met her eyes directly. Take your hand off me, now. She released me as if I'd burned her, stepping back with something that might have been fear. Good. Fear was appropriate. Fear meant she was finally understanding the consequences of her actions. This isn't one mistake, I continued. This is the culmination of months of disrespect, dismissal, and taking for granted everything I've provided for you. Last night, you crossed the final line. I'll do anything, she pleaded. I'll apologize to Jesse. I'll tell him the dinner is off. You'll pack your things and leave my house. My voice remained level, but each word carried the weight of 27 years of authority she'd apparently forgotten I possessed. You wanted independence from family traditions? Congratulations. You're about to get all the independence you can handle. I watched her face cycle through denial, bargaining, and finally, the beginnings of acceptance. She was starting to understand that her father, the man who'd bandaged her scraped knees and driven her to soccer practice and paid for her college education, was not bluffing. You'll regret this, she said, but the fight had gone out of her voice. The only thing I regret is not doing this 5 years ago, when you started treating me like hired help instead of your father. I turned and walked into the house, leaving her standing in the driveway beside a car she would never drive. Through the kitchen window, I watched her pull out her phone, probably calling Jesse to explain why their carefully planned evening had just imploded. 1 hour and 55 minutes. Not much time to pack up 27 years of life, but she was young and resourceful. She'd figure it out. After all, she'd wanted to be treated like an adult. Adults face the consequences of their choices. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 4 times. In 3 hours, Jesse would arrive for a dinner that would never happen, to meet a woman who would no longer live here. Perfect timing, perfect justice. Some lessons are worth $40,000. Others are priceless. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.